This book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, might actually blow your mind, and you might cry and you might feel confused and relieved, and it might just all finally click for you. Now, this is not just a book for people who have grown up in a dysfunctional family. Oh, and by the way, it's by Lindsay Gibson. In fact, I think this book is for anyone who wants to understand other people and understand yourself. I know for me, it helped me understand my relationships, platonic ones, romantic ones, from the past, from the present, and hopefully for the future. Now, today's topic might be quite heavy for some people, but more than anything, I hope that it's eye-opening. But before diving deeper into it, I would like to remind you that if you ever feel like you would like to speak to a professional, you can. That is why this video is in paid partnership with BetterHelp. Now, last time I mentioned that I did an exercise with my therapist once where I got to close my eyes and visualize meeting myself at a younger age and telling her some things. And some of you really appreciated that I shared an example from real life that I've actually done with my therapist, and I asked, it's called reparenting visualization. It falls under that umbrella term, I guess. And yeah, look that up if you're interested and talk to your therapist about it. There are many more exercises, I believe, you can do for inner child work. Now, to find a therapist, you can sign up to BetterHelp. You just fill out a questionnaire and then you will get in contact with a therapist, usually within 48 hours. You can have your sessions via phone or video chat or whatever works best for you. To sign up, visit betterhelp.com/Lana or choose Lana Blakely during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. A lifelong feeling of emotional loneliness can come from feeling emotionally unseen by parents as a child, and it's not easy to describe that feeling. If you had to, you might call it a feeling of emptiness, of being alone in the world. Or you might describe it as a feeling of existential loneliness, but it's not existential, it came from your family. And as a child, it's even more difficult to describe this gut feeling of emptiness. And this feeling might continue to haunt you into adulthood, even when you have created your own life and you're out of your, household with your parents and that dynamic. So you might grow into an adult, and even when you think you should be happy because you have a home and friends and a family of your own, perhaps, that core sense of emotional isolation may remain due to lack of emotional intimacy growing up. And this feeling can come with guilt too. So you might think, I grew up with a roof over my head and food on the table, and my parents provided for me financially and met my other physical needs, and they sacrificed so much. I should be thankful and not complain. So first, the premise of the book is not, here are all the reasons you should blame and resent your parents. That is not productive. Rather, this book is for you to understand things about yourself and your history, and to learn to see your parents objectively, to understand why they are the way they are, which, spoiler alert, usually they are the way they are because they also grew up with emotionally immature parents. So what is an emotionally immature parent? You know the feeling of not feeling seen, like the person does not pay attention to or notice your inner world and experiences. They dismiss it even. You don't feel comforted or safe opening up to them. The person in question, parent perhaps, might have had a pattern, which is important that it's a pattern, of often overreacting to relatively minor things, having a black and white way of thinking and not being receptive to new ideas. They might have rarely apologized or experienced regret because they did not self-reflect. You might have experienced a pattern of not feeling listened to and rarely receiving your parents' full attention. Perhaps your parent was the person whose mood affected the whole household, and they weren't sensitive to your feelings. You might have felt like you were trying harder to understand your parent than they were trying to understand you. Perhaps it was fleeting, inconsistent, unpredictable. One moment you felt connected and like they were emotionally available, and the next you didn't, but you couldn't really predict it. You couldn't know when you would get the different versions of your parent. Emotionally immature parents don't try to put themselves in other people's shoes. If you express your concerns to them, it's more likely that they will become defensive and not take any responsibility for their actions. They might dismiss the situation entirely and call you overly emotional or too sensitive, and they aren't making an effort to understand what's going on inside other people. And you'll notice that they seem very stuck in their ways, and it's almost sometimes like they're proud of it. You know, they say things like, I just am the way that I am and I can't change. Another thing that I thought was interesting from the book was where she described that this emotionally immature parent or person, they will want you to show concern for their problems, but when you do, they aren't likely to accept your help and your suggestions. So they will pull you in, and then when you try to help, they will push you away. Accountability is a flimsy concept for them. You know, they will do something to hurt you and then want you to just get over it and for things to go back to normal, and they will get frustrated when you can't do that. Now, suddenly in their mind, you are the problem because you are the one dwelling and bringing it up. They don't understand why others can't just forgive, forget, and move on. They don't understand that it takes time to heal from a betrayal. Again, the reason I think everyone should read this book is because while the author writes about the parent-child relationship specifically, I think the basic concepts and ideas apply or can apply to all of our relationships, you know, about the way that we are treated and the way that we treat others. Now, when it comes to the parent-child relationship, if you did grow up in a household with emotionally immature parents, it's likely that it's left its mark on you as an adult. If you grew up not being validated as a child, you might grow to become a people pleaser. So you may go above and beyond to gain approval from those around you. Subconsciously, usually, you may seek out approval and love in the wrong places. You've possibly grown up to become the problem fixer, even problems you did not cause, taking responsibility for things that aren't your fault. You might believe that if only you were a certain way, like if only you were rich or famous or pretty or whatever it might be, you would finally be loved, or you would finally feel free, or people would finally see you and appreciate you. Now, because being vulnerable and emotional and expressive wasn't validated and reciprocated as a child, you likely did not get to flourish and develop into the person you were meant to become. Like, have you ever felt like you don't have a strong sense of self? Like you don't have a clear individual identity? And now if that was you, as a result, you may not trust yourself. You may not trust your instincts. You might find yourself, you know, constantly looking for reassurance and looking for answers in others rather than within. And if you grew up being rejected as a child, which usually happens if you had emotionally immature parents, you may grow up and struggle with self-confidence. You may not believe that you can actually have good ideas and that other people might simply like you for who you are. You might not feel like you are lovable because you've been so overlooked. Why would anyone choose me? Alright, so what is emotional maturity? You know the feeling of having someone you can tell anything to. They make you feel safe, seen, heard, understood. They meet your enthusiasm, they listen to you, and they pay attention to how you feel. This is how an emotionally mature parent meets their child. This is emotional intimacy. It is the reciprocal feeling of being interested in one another and taking time to really listen and understand each other's experiences. That's the very basic, fundamental ingredient for human relationships. And now you might listen to this conversation or read the book and think, wait, much of the description of an emotionally mature parent actually describes me. I am emotionally immature. Well, if you do that and you then think, I'm quite unhappy with that realization and it needs to be fixed. Good. Acknowledging a fault and then taking actionable steps to address that fault probably puts you ahead of most other people's level of maturity. So now what? How do you deal with an emotionally immature parent or just an emotionally immature person in general? And how do you heal? Well, firstly, read the book because there is a lot more than I have covered here and that I'm going to cover, but I think one of the most important lessons, one that is the most freeing, one that I know many of you have heard many times before, whether you have dealt with an unhealthy family dynamic or a partner or friend, is that you can't change people, but you can change how you respond. You can set boundaries for yourself and you can tweak your expectations. You can decide to no longer wish and hope that the outcome of a conversation or relationship will be different than the previous 100 conversations that you've already had with that person. Now, is it a hard pill to swallow that someone you love or care deeply for will in fact never become the person you believe they could be or the person you wish or hope they would be? Of course it is, but the harsh reality is that it just doesn't work that way. Another thing is to recognize that your desire to feel special and loved is not selfish. As Gibson writes, just like you, our distant ancestors had a strong need for emotional closeness. Your need for attention and connection is as old as the human race. You have prehistoric reasons for not liking to be lonely.